Abraham Lincoln was born February 12, 1809, the second child of Thomas Lincoln and Nancy Lincoln in a one-room log cabin on the Sinking Spring Farm in Hardin, Kentucky. Thomas was born on January 6, 1778 in Rockingham County, Virginia. He worked nearly his whole life as a farmer and carpenter. Nancy Lincoln was born February 5, 1784 in Virginia. Nancy spent her life as a housewife caring for Abraham and his sister Sarah. As an ambitious 22-year-old who was now old enough to make his own decisions, Abraham Lincoln struck out on his own. Canoeing down the Sangamon River, Lincoln ended up in the village of New Salem in Sangamon County. In the spring of 1831, hired by a New Salem businessman, Denton Offutt, and accompanied by friends, he took goods by flatboat from New Salem to New Orleans via the Sangamon, Illinois, and Mississippi rivers. After arriving in New Orleans and witnessing slavery firsthand, he walked back home. In March 1832, he began his political career with his first campaign for the Illinois General Assembly. He lacked an education, powerful friends, and money, which may be why he lost. He then decided to become a lawyer and began teaching himself law by reading Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England and other law books. He won election to the state legislature. Admitted to the bar in 1836, he moved to Springfield, Illinois, and began to practice law. He served 4 successive terms in the Illinois House of Representatives as a Whig rep from Sangamon County. In 1840, Lincoln became engaged to Mary Todd, who was from a wealthy slaveholding family in Lexington, Kentucky. They met in Springfield, Illinois in December 1839 and were engaged in the following December. The two married on November 4, 1842 in the Springfield mansion of Mary's married sister. In 1844, the couple bought a house in Springfield near Lincoln's law office. Together, the couple had 4 children: Robert Todd Lincoln, Edward Baker Lincoln, Willie Lincoln, and Thomas Ted Lincoln. Robert Todd was the only one who lived past the age of 18 and was able to continue the namesake. In 1846, Lincoln was elected to the House of Representatives, where he served a 2-year term.
Lincoln's Senate campaign featured the 7 Lincoln-Douglas debates of 1858. The principles stood in stark contrast both physically and politically. Lincoln warned that the slave power was threatening the values of republicanism and accused Douglas of distorting the values of the founding fathers that all men are created equal, while Douglas emphasized his Freeport doctrine that local settlers were free to choose whether to allow slavery or not, and accused Lincoln of having joined the abolitionists. The debates had an atmosphere of a prize fight and drew crowds in the thousands. Lincoln stated Douglas's popularity sovereign theory was a threat to the nation's morality, and that Douglas represented a conspiracy to extend slavery to free states. Douglas said that Lincoln was defying the authority of the U.S. Supreme Court in the Dred Scott decision. Though the Republican legislative candidates won more popular votes, the Democrats won more seats, and the legislature re-elected Douglas to the Senate. Despite the bitterness of the defeat for Lincoln, his articulation of the issues gave him national political reputation. On May 9 through 10, 1860, the Illinois Republican State Convention was held in Decatur. Lincoln's followers organized a campaign team, resulting in Lincoln receiving his first endorsement to run for the presidency. Exploiting the embellished legend of his frontier days with his father, Lincoln's supporters adopted the label of the Rail Candidate. On May 18th at the Republican National Convention in Chicago, Lincoln won the nomination on the 3rd ballot. A former Democrat, Hannibal Hamlin of Maine, was nominated for vice president to balance the ticket. Lincoln's success depended on his reputation as a moderate on the slavery issue and his strong support for Whiggish programs of internal improvements and the protective tariff. On the 3rd ballot, Pennsylvania put him over the top. As Douglas and other candidates went through with their campaigns, Lincoln was the only one of them who gave no speeches. Instead, he monitored the campaign closely and relied on the enthusiasm of the Republican Party. The goal was to demonstrate the superior power of free labor, whereby a common farmer boy could work his way up to the top by his own efforts. On November 6, 1860, Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States, beating Democrats Stephen A. Douglas, John C. Breckinridge of the Southern Democrats, and John Bell of the New Constitutional Union Party. He was the first president from the Republican Party. His victory was entirely due to the strength of his support in the North and the West. No ballots were cast for him in 10 of the 15 Southern slave states, and he won only 2 of the 996 counties in all the Southern states. As Lincoln's election became evident, secessionists made clear that their intent to leave the Union before he took office the next March. On December 20th, 1860, South Carolina took the lead by adopting an ordinance of succession. By February 1st, 1861, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas followed. 6 of these states then adopted the Constitution and declared themselves to be a sovereign nation, the Confederate States of America. The Upper South and border states, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, and Arkansas, listened to, but initially rejected, secessionist appeal. President Buchanan and President-elect Lincoln refused to recognize the Confederacy, declaring secession illegal. The Confederacy selected Jefferson Davis as its provincial president on February 9, 1861.
February 23, 1861, Lincoln directed his inaugural address to the South, proclaiming once again that he had no intention or inclination to abolish slavery in the southern states. The president ended his address with an appeal to the people of the South. "We're not enemies but friends. We must not be enemies." The mystic cords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot gave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. The failure of the Peace Conference of 1861 signaled that legislative compromise was impossible. By March 1861, no leaders of the insurrection had proposed rejoining the Union in any terms. Meanwhile, Lincoln and the Republican leadership agreed that dismantling of the Union could not be tolerated. It was now his responsibility to keep it together, no matter the consequences. After the fall of Fort Sumter, Lincoln realized the importance of taking immediate executive control of the war and making it open to put down the rebellion. Lincoln encountered an unprecedented political and military crisis, and he responded as commander-in-chief, using unprecedented powers. He used his presidential rights to expand his war powers and imposed a blockade on all Confederate shipping ports, dispersed funds before appropriation by Congress, and after spending habeas corpus, arrested and imprisoned thousands of suspected Confederate sympathizers. With his rights being used to their furthest extent, Lincoln came under fire from critics who argued that he had overstepped his boundaries and was acting as a dictator-like figure. The war effort was the source of continual disparagement of Lincoln and dominated his time and attention. Copperheads criticized Lincoln for refusing to compromise on the slavery issue. Conversely, the radical Republicans criticized him for moving too slow in abolishing slavery. On August 6, 1861, Lincoln signed the Confiscation Act that authorized judiciary proceedings to confiscate and free slaves who were used to support the Confederate war effort. In practice, the law had little effect, but it did signal political support for abolishing slavery in the Confederacy. At this time, Lincoln was headed down a one-way street to abolish slavery. He would either be the man responsible for the success or the one at fault if it failed. On June 19th, 1862, endorsed by Lincoln, Congress passed an act banning slavery on all federal territory. In July 1862, the Second Confiscation Act was passed, which set up court procedures that could free the slaves of anyone convicted of aiding the rebellion. Although Lincoln, it was not within Congress's power to free the slaves within the states, he approved the bill in deference to the legislature. In a letter from August 22, 1862, the president said the primary goal of his action as president was preserving the Union, and that what I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union, and what I forbear because I do not believe it would help to save the Union.
The Emancipation Proclamation, issued on September 22, 1862, and put into effect on January 1, 1863, declared free the slaves in 10 states not under Union control, with exemptions specified for areas already under Union control in 2 states. Again, Lincoln states that it is his responsibility to free the blacks from the unjust institution of slavery, and with his power given to him as president, he will do just that. With the great Union victory at the Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863 and the defeat of the Copperheads in the Ohio election in the fall, Lincoln maintained a strong base of party support and was in a strong position to redefine the war effort, despite the New York City draft riots. The stage was set for his address at the Gettysburg Battlefield Cemetery on November 19, 1863. In 272 words and 3 minutes, Lincoln asserted the nation was born not in 1789 but in 1776. Conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He defined the war as an effort dedicated to these principles of liberty and equality for all. The emancipation of slaves was now part of the national war effort. He declared that the deaths of so many brave soldiers would not be in vain, that slavery would end as a result of the losses, and the future of democracy in the world would be assured, that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Lincoln concluded that the Civil War had a profound objective: a new birth of freedom in the nation. The future of the new nation was new, based on the belief that all humans should have equal rights, and that was Lincoln's responsibility. Lincoln was re-elected in 1864 after receiving a landslide electoral vote. Reconstruction began during the war. Shortly after Lee's surrender, a general asked Lincoln how the defeated Confederates should be treated, and Lincoln replied, "Let 'em up easy," confirming his premise to keep the Union together. His amnesty proclamation of December 8, 1863 offered pardons to those who had not held a Confederate civil office, had not mistreated Union prisoners, and would sign an oath of allegiance. Passage of a proposal amended to end slavery became part of the Republican/Unionist platform of 1864. After a long debate in the House, a second attempt passed Congress on January 31, 1865, and was sent to the state legislatures for ratification. Upon ratification, it became the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution on December 6, 1865. Sadly, on April 14th, President Lincoln was shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth at the Ford Theater Lincoln died early the next morning.
That day, President Lincoln may have died, but his influence lives on to this day. Because he took it upon himself so valiantly, Lincoln is forever remembered as the man who made America what it is today. This only became possible by him taking full responsibility not only for his own actions, but the actions of the nation. Abraham Lincoln is the man responsible for keeping the Union together and giving all men the right to live freely in what is now the greatest country in the world.